Hi everyone, how's it going? Team here, and this is another episode of BxJS, a show about building things with JavaScript. And today, by your request, we're going to be talking about setting up your own server. Before we get to the meat of it, so to say, I want to do a small side note, let's put it this way, and say that there is now a donate button using PayPal in the Twitch description, as well as the YouTube description of this video, and every video from now on if you're watching this on YouTube, because you guys wanted that. I honestly don't know why you want to give me money, but let me just say that if you have a spare money, if you're not in dread need of money, and you basically think that I have contributed to your learning experience or basically have been useful to you, I will be happy to accept any donations that you have, but know this, I will most likely spend this on video games. So if you're okay with that, I'm good with it, just throw them at me. So yes, if you want to support this stream, not by just following and, retweeting, participating in Discord and helping other people, then you can now support it using PayPal. And I will be forever grateful if you do that. You have been warned and given the information, so let's get cracking and let's get to setting up our own server. So I thought that basically we could either go with using a third-party server, like get it from DigitalOcean, Scaleway, or whatever, the hosting provider, but that would mean that we have sort of a better version of it, right? Because most of those providers actually have base images that are more or less already configured, and you only need to do like minor tweaks. So what I did instead is I have here a VirtualBox that is running a Debian server, which is basically bare bones. So there's like nothing installed on it aside from the sudo and basic user, right? So I configured it to be available at debian.vm for me, so we can actually go into it using SSH. And as you can see, there's there's only sudo right now, which I configured to work for YAMLite. It works with the password, and that's it, right? So I can go to the roots, but I don't think I can actually connect as a root, which is a neat little security option. So yeah, it doesn't work actually. So if you have a server, some providers do give it out to you with the root as a default user. Then the first thing you should do is you should create your own user and never use root anymore, right? So if you need to do something, do it with sudo and then don't touch it. So basically this is the first step, and it's a very basic one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to configure the SSH authentication, because running login and password is first of all not very secure because you can brute force a password. Second of all, is not convenient, right? You have to enter your password every time, you have to remember it, you have to write it down somewhere. It's a pain in the ass. So what you can actually do, you can use public and private key authentication, right? So this is what is typically used, and looks like we don't have an SSH folder. So I'm going to make dir.ssh on the server, right? I'm going to cd into it, and I'm going to touch authorized keys, I believe, right? I'm gonna vim it. So now you need your public key. So I'm gonna increase the size of the font here. No, that's not what I want. Let me resize it a bit. So I'm gonna cut my SSH, no, not SBT, SSH ID. Yeah, I mean, we can go with IDED. So I have a bunch of those, but basically they are more or less same. And I'm gonna paste this key here. If you are interested in how to generate public keys, then for example, GitHub has a very good description for that. I think this, yeah, so this is the full guide basically from checking for existing to generating a new one, adding it to SSH agent if you're using some other third-party thing like, the Windows Putty or whatever, and using it for GitHub, but more or less the same way goes for the SSH connection, right? So now that we have it in authorized keys, if I exit, if I try to SSH again, I won't actually have to enter anything because it will use a key now, right? So once you enable SSH key authorization, what you want to do is you want to disable password authorization, because you can still use password and brute force it, right? So what you want to do is you want to sudo vim, I believe it was config. There we go. So we are going to edit this and say that authentication, public key authentication. Yes, this is default. This is what we want. And then there should be password authentication. No, this is what we're going to say. No, right? Here. There we go. So systemctl restart. Yes, I have to do it with sudo, right? There we go. Okay, so now if I exit and try to connect with root, there you go. So now as you can see, the password login is no longer allowed, but when I try to log in with any of my private keys, it will just reject it because they are not in the root user. This is exactly what we want. Okay, so next thing is, while it is extremely hard to brute force SSH server with a public key, you can still do that. So what you want to do is you want to actually install a utility that will protect you from brute force attacks. One of those, and I think it's like one of the best ones, and it's pretty ubiquitous, so it not only works for SSHD, but as well for like HTTP daemons and so on and so forth. It's called fail to ban, and this is what we're going to use. The cool thing about it is that actually very easy to install and configure, and there's probably a guide. There you go. There's a DigitalOcean guide for that. By the way, DigitalOcean has a really good knowledge base of tutorials related to server configuration, so I recommend, highly recommend looking at it. So get install, fail to ban. I believe you don't really need to do much actually in terms of configuration. So yes, we're going to install it. It's a Python-based package, works by analyzing logs and essentially banning whatever IP addresses are trying to do the same thing over and over again. It's a very stupid approach, but hey, works pretty well. Okay, so next thing, we need to copy the config to local, from local, right? We can just do this. Once copied, yeah, so we just copy the local example config. Nano, I don't want nano, I want my vim. There you go. And ignore IP. We don't really need ignore IP, right? So let's see, ignore IP. I mean, okay, the default one, localhost, is obviously this is something we want. Ban time, 600 seconds. That means like 10 minutes. I guess it's okay. I think the defaults are more or less sensible. I don't really need anything else, right? So this is default. So you can configure emails, yes, if you want to be notified about the attacks. In our case, we don't really care. And it looks like we can just leave it by default, right? So it doesn't seem like we care about it. The defaults seem to be sensible. So now, because we have failed to ban installed, it will automatically detect those attempts to break into the system essentially and prevent them. So now we have the server, we have failed to ban, we have SSH access to it, which does not require us entering passwords. Another problem is that we do need a password for sudo right now, which is slightly annoying, right? So you might want to do that anyway in some circumstances, but I personally, since most of the servers that I use are managed by people that I trust, essentially, what I do is I typically say, wait, what? No password, yes, and we save that. That's what was the problem. I think fix it. Just make the typo there. Sudo echo 103. There we go. So now we have sudo without password. There are, as I said, there are cases when you might not want that, but once again, if you're managing server yourself and obviously you trust yourself, you can do that. And you know, if you have like fail to ban and public key authentication, there is nothing really to be afraid of, because if someone gets inside, you're screwed anyway. So it's a nice convenience thing. All right, so we get that. So next thing is we need to set up our development environment or deployment environment, right? So there's a lot of ways of doing it, obviously. You can set up nginx and then nodejs and then process everything or pipe everything through that nginx as a front end. But if you watched my previous live streams or videos, you might know that I'm a huge fan of Docker, and this is the way I manage it. So I'm going to show you how to set up a Docker, right? Or Docker-based deployment environment. So we're going to install Docker C on Debian, right? This is what we want. There we go. The Docker has a decent docs on how to set up everything. So we are going to go ahead and install whatever they suggest, because there's like a bunch of libraries they want. So once this is installed, we're going to pull the public key from their repository like this and add it to apt key. We're gonna make sure that the key is indeed correct. That looks fine. Docker release, yes. And then we are gonna add their repository to our apt config, right? And I think that should be it. So because we're not using the Wheezy, I believe we're only using the latest stable, which is, hell if I remember the name, Stretch, right? And then we just install Docker, right? So it's just another package. It's installed with apt, no problems, no magic here, essentially. If you ever use Linux, you should be able to do that yourself without too many problems, following this very guide, right? And once we've done that, first thing we want to do is we want to test that it works. And we're done. Okay, so theoretically, if we run this, we should see hello world. So, okay, so we connected to Docker socket, it pulls the image, and there we go, works. So now the problem is, I have to run it with sudo, right? Which is not perfect. So first of all, it means that we have to elevate the writes every time. Second of all, it's just not convenient. So I'm gonna say user mods adds to group Docker myself, right? So I'm adding myself to the Docker group, which means now I can say Docker PS. I have to relog in, I think. But now I'm in a Docker group, which is actually allowed to access socket without the writes elevation. So there you go. Now we have direct access to Docker. We installed the Docker, and that's actually 90% of basically what you need to do with the server. So fail to ban Docker and public key authentication for SSH. Final thing to do is basically configure a proxy that will handle the routing between the front end and whatever services you deploy, right? So there are two options: nginx proxy, Docker nginx proxy. So yes, it's called nginx proxy. So it's automated nginx proxy for Docker, based on the same pack, like the Docker gen package from the same guy. It works. I mean, it's an nginx basically with auto writing configs. It works fine, but somewhat limited with the configs, and it does not work well with Swarm or any distributed sort of deployments, right? I think there is a way to make it work, but it's kind of pain in the ass. It does have also the nginx proxy. Let's encrypt. So it does have the companion package that you can use to enable let's encrypt by default as well. But there's like a few additional steps to set it up, essentially. Nothing wrong about that. I've used it for quite some time, I think more than 1 year, and it was fine. But there is actually a much better solution, in my opinion. There's a thing called Traefik. It's written in Golang, and it's really, really good. It's written to work in Docker, Swarm, Kubernetes, whatever you can imagine, basically, right? All of those container APIs. And it has a way more flexible configuration. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually start Traefik. So I'm going to show you how to do it first manually, and then how to use Exoframe to save a lot of time for that. So we are going to run Traefik, and in this case, we're going to run it in Docker mode, right? Wait a second. There should be a user guide for Docker configuration examples, maybe? No, this is not what we want. Let's encrypt in Docker. There we go. So yeah, first of all, yes, we need to create a network that will be basically where you would connect the containers that would need access to the external web, right? And then we need some folder with Traefik config. So in this case, let's just put it here in the home YAMLites, because whatever. We are gonna, yes, we're gonna touch Docker compose YAML. Once again, Traefik has a pretty good docs, so you can pretty much go through that yourself if you want to. So we're gonna create Acme JSON. This is gonna be our storage for Acme certificates. And we can touch, yeah, Traefik toml. Basically, the thing is that most of the time you can also define exactly the same config using what do you call it? Using like command line flags. So when you launch it, okay, I'm gonna use nano because it probably won't screw up my pasting. There we go. Okay, now let's see, Traefik toml, default entry point. So, okay, so this config here includes, wait we are not gonna be doing that. So we have, what was the domain name that I used? Debian VM, right? Debian VM. Okay, which exposed by default. We're gonna set this to true just for the purpose of the demo. Your email, yeah, so this is like additional, so this is this acme thing is essentially the let's encrypt config, and in this case I am actually going to remove all of that because it's not going to work, and my IP gonna get banned for, you know, repeated failed attempts to actually do that. So there is additional things here. So first of all, there's this entry point HTTP redirect. This enables redirect from HTTP to HTTPS, what you normally want in production. I'm going to kill that as well. And I'm going to kill the HTTPS definition too. So we're only going to be working on HTTP, and we also don't need the HTTPS entry point here. So it's a very simple config in this case. And I think, yeah, we don't really need anything else here. So we can edit Docker Compose. And actually volume now, we don't actually need acme.json, right? Because we don't use the HTTPS here in this case. So Traefik toml. I think it is just Traefik toml, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Have a look. Just Traefik toml. Yes, it is just Traefik toml. Okay. So run that. Save it. Now we say Docker Compose apt -d, right? Right. Okay. Sudo apt get install Docker Compose. I'm always forgetting that Docker Compose does not come as a package of, that's a part of Docker, even you have to install it separately. So Docker Compose apt -d, we should, so it will now pull the Traefik image actually. And the image is tiny, by the way, since Traefik is written in Golang, it results in a very small binary, and the container is also very, very small. So we can have a look, docker logs -f, we can check that logs are fine. Okay, so it doesn't crash. So in theory, if I go now to, whoops, no. So http://debian.vm, this is my local address. We can actually see 404. This is the page from the Traefik that says, hey, nothing is found, right? So here's how you actually run things with Traefik. So we're going to run a simple nginx container. So we're going to say nginx latest, right? And what you need to do to make it exposed to the world is just add Traefik frontend rule here, right? So this is actually the only thing that is interesting for us. Everything else is additional config options that are optional. And I'm going to say Debian VM, right? So because we don't have anything occupying that port. And once I start that, so it's obviously going to pull the nginx image. Once it starts it, if I did not screw anything up, we should actually see nginx on this page instead of 404. I might be forgetting something, but I don't think I do. So you can optionally like set the ports, protocols, network. Probably, oh yeah, I forgot to, yeah, okay, that won't work actually. Docker stop brave care, yes, let's remove that. So I forgot to specify the network, right? So we need to say net web network. I'm always forgetting the flags. I think it's network. There we go. Okay, so theoretically, nginx now works, right? So this is literally all you have to do to run Docker containers behind the proxy, right? There are obviously additional options that allow you to specify like more complex rules, ports, protocols, whatever you can. But you can even have like load balancing, multiple backends, and so on and so forth. So the cool thing is that, for example, we can stop this nginx again, right? Stop it, remove it. So now we get 404. But the cool thing is that Traefik actually supports partial routing. So you can say that I wanted, where was the guide, user guides, configuration, entry points? I think it was here. No, it's not here. Common, what's the name of it? Front-end tool, right? What was it? Where the hell was they describing that? Ah, rules. Yes, there you go. So yeah, so you can actually say host and path, and then yeah, oh, you can combine it. There you go. That's how you do it. So and then we can say that it's going to be under path. /test, right? And if I run it, we should theoretically still see 404 here, but if I request test, obviously it's going to be routed in the same way to nginx, so nginx should have this /test there, but you can actually see that the request goes to nginx, which is really cool. So this is the very basic setup, and in theory that's all you need to get your containers running, right? So you can basically then push your containers to the server and start them, or alternatively you can configure the certificate authentication for your Docker and expose the sockets, but all of that is not very convenient. So I'm not sure if you've seen the project. I've had a video on it before on the channel, and I think I did not stream it on Twitch yet, but I built a project called Exoframe that allows a very, very, very simple deployment of projects right from the command line from your machine to the server directly, right? It's super easy to set up. So once you have Docker, I'm gonna kill all the things that we have here. So I'm gonna say Docker stop Traefik. I'm gonna remove, that's too many Traefiks. I'm gonna remove that. I go here, gonna remove the Traefik folder here, right? And that's it. We're gonna go to the Traefik Exoframe server. So this is what you need to run on your server. It's a Docker image. You can literally run it with one command. So this is all you need. I'm gonna fire up VS Code here. So this is the command that will run Exoframe, right? So there is a bunch of things you will have to configure. First of all, you need to provide your Docker socket because it manages Docker containers. Second of all, you need to provide the path to Exoframe config. So in this case, we're going to say YAMLite home, home YAMLite Exoframe. I'm going to call it .exoframe. So I'm going to make dir.exoframe. I'm going to cd into it. Next thing is you need to link it with your SSH authorized keys because it also uses private and public key authentication. So you don't have to configure anything else for auth. Then you set the private key, which is used for encrypting all your sessions and everything. So we're just going to say Debian VM tests. It can be whatever you want. So basically it has to be unique and long enough. So we're going to say it's a backend Exoframe server, and we're going to say host is going to be Exoframe Debian VM, right? And that's it. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to run that here. Obviously, it's not going to find the Exoframe server image. Gonna pull it. It's not big enough as well, so it's like 40 or 50 megs. It is Node.js app in there, so it does have some weight to it at least. But I've tried to optimize it as much as I could, so it's quite fast and quite small. So once the Exoframe server is pulled, it will start the server, and server will, in order, start auto-configured Traefik instance. So the cool thing is that here, if you want to enable Let's Encrypt, you can just, so this will create, server config. And we can actually cut that. And you can see here that you can enable Let's Encrypt by just setting this to true and then specifying your email as an administrator. That's all you need. You can also enable or disable compression, which will automatically gzip whatever comes through it. And there are as well some additional config options that you might not even need them, right? So now if we go to Exoframe Debian VM, we actually will see, come on. Want HTTP, thank you very much. You'll actually see that this is Exoframe powered page now, right? So here's how it works. Now here I have Exoframe command line tool. Whoops, no, that is not what I want. Version. There we go. So this is my obviously development branch, but whatever. So we can actually go to Exoframe project and say server. So I have some test projects here. So here, for example, we have a nodejs project, right? I can open it in VS Code to show you how it looks. So it's a very basic project. It just uses the nodes HTTP package to serve hello world, right? So, but it is a node project, so it requires a nodejs to run. Now, here's the cool thing. So I can say Exoframe endpoint right now, and I can actually pick between multiple. So we want to add new one, right? Exoframe Debian VM, right? So we add a new endpoint. And now we log in into it. I think we should be able to log in right now. So ID RSA, my password, and we're logged in. So you can actually now use Exoframe LS to see all the deployments, which we obviously don't have. Here's the cool bit. So we have our project, right? Which has package.js and nginx.js. So package.json specifies that the start script is node index. So all I have to do to deploy that now on a server is just say Exoframe. They will package all folder and send it to server, build a new Docker image out of it, start it, and assign whatever the domain name you want. So in this case, I actually forgot to change the domain. It's set to localhost, which obviously won't work. So let's say we're going to be demo Debian VM, right? And it's obviously going to take some time to build it first time, because it has to pull the node.js image, which is not there. So it's like, you know, taking some time. But the rebuilds, once I show you in a second when we push the new config, you will see that the redeployments are quite damn fast. And let me interrupt it, and I'm going to run it in a verbs mode just to see what the hell's going on. So, okay, there we go. Yeah, there you go. As you can see, so it's actually downloading the node.js image, which is not there. For some reason, it's not exactly fast. I mean, I have like 400 megabit connection there, so usually it happens very quickly, but maybe the streaming is interrupting with it, but I don't know. Anyway, so once it downloads the image, I will show you the update phase as well, which is also really cool, I think, and some other minor features of Exoframe. Okay, so it downloads the base image for Node.js, and then it will build. There you go. So it creates basically the Docker image for this is sort of follows the best practices, so you don't have to think about that as long as you expose the server on port 80 and specify the start script. And now we can actually just click this and see our Hello World demo. Now here's the cool part. So say you want to change something, right? Say you want to, okay, I want to say hello 1 to 3. And what you can do is you can just say Exoframe -u, and that will update the deployment. So it actually will rebuild the image, start a new version, and then tear down the old one in a way that makes this almost seamless, right? So there is near zero downtime, and that's slightly configurable in the config. So if you want a complete zero downtime, you can also do that. So another cool thing is that you can say Exoframe token, which will generate a deployment token, deploy test, for example. You will get this token one time, so you cannot see it again. You have to save it somewhere. It's the same way GitHub tokens work. And the cool thing is that even if you are not logged in, so for example, this is useful for continuous delivery, right? Continuous deployment, actually. What you can say is you can say -u. So we can say hello world. So we redeploy it again with the basic stuff. And then you can say -t, and then you give this token. And instead of using your login password or certificate or whatever, it will actually authenticate using this token. And this can be done basically so you can encrypt this token and save it in Travis CI and then deploy using tokens, all right? So you can actually see the new version and it will be deployed from GitHub, for example. So yes, Exoframe LS. Obviously, you can, see logs for your deployment, so you can check the name, and yeah, there you go. There's our logs. You can remove it if you don't want it anymore. And all of that happens in Docker, so if you like physically look at the Docker containers, you'll actually see all of that. But the Exoframe manages all of that for you. I think that's basically all I wanted to show with regards to the server setup. This is how I set up my servers, essentially. So if you, yeah, like as I already pointed out, like CodeZen, for example, is example of the infrastructure like this. So I will exit this and I will say Exoframe endpoint. So Exoframe allows you to have multiple servers, so you can actually choose one of them. So for example, this is one, the CodeZen one, right? So you can see I have like a bunch of demos here. You can just click on one of them and see, okay, here's the website, right away. Thank you for watching. Do not forget that you can vote on other topics that I will live stream and cover. So there's like high availability sockets, Windows 10 as development system, AI discussion, which I think we're going to have some guests for that once it comes to the point where You guys are mostly interested in that. IDE configuration, accessibility, internationalization, open source contribution to Exoframe, Firebase, game, image processing, React and Bulma, and all of that stuff. So basically, go ahead, go to the GitHub, vote for the proposals that you like. The link to the proposals, by the way, is under the Twitch. If you're watching this on Twitch, and if you're watching on YouTube, it should be in the video description. That's basically it. Thank you for watching, guys, and I see you next time. Bye-bye.